Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Mary and I'm a designer and illustrator living in Canada. Today I'm going to tell you about a piece of my painting process that is super important and really sets my work up for success and for the painting process to be more fun and frankly a little bit easier. And that is underpainting. Underpainting is the first step whenever I start a new piece. After I've laid out my paper, transferred my sketch, I set in with the underpainting. I have a few examples here of paintings in my sketchbook with underpaintings. This one here is of a velociraptor skull, and you can see the underpainting peeking through around the edges here, around the edge of the eye socket there. So the original underpainting for this, even though the background is blue, was yellow, and you can see it on the edges there, and it adds a lot of depth to the piece and a lot of sort of luminosity that shines through. There's a couple other pieces back here where I did some master studies with underpainting. So the underpainting for this piece was actually orange, and you can see the bits of orange peeking through on the deer. But otherwise, you wouldn't really be able to tell because I've covered it up with gouache because gouache is an opaque medium. But it really adds a lot of warmth to the deer itself. And this piece here had another yellow underpainting, which gives this sort of effect of the sunlight hitting the horses and their hooves and reflecting off of the ground. So underpaintings are super useful. They're so useful. And if you're painting full pieces in gouache without an underpainting, I think that the addition of an underpainting can really elevate your work. So even if you think you don't need it, maybe give it a try. And I'm going to do a demo here with a couple of different versions and show you some different techniques for underpaintings and different reasons why you might choose a particular color for your underpainting. So the way that underpainting was introduced to me in art school, I went to the Alberta University of the Arts back when it was still the Alberta College of Art and Design, and I did my degree in illustration, which is a Bachelor's of Design program. They introduced it with doing it in acrylic with underpaintings of the primary colors, so red, yellow, and blue. So that's what I'm going to show you here today. And this drawing here, I'll pop it on the screen, is actually a drawing of one of my cat's cat toys. And it's a little mouse, and he's sort of like these beige and burlap type textures with brown feathers on the back. And it just has a variety of textures that will play really nicely with the underpainting technique. So here is the drawing, and if you'd like to follow along with the exact same drawing, feel free to screenshot this video. I will also have it attached to the post in my Patreon if you're a patron or would like to become one. There's a link in the description below for that. So you can use this exact same drawing if you'd like to follow along step by step. To start off, I'm going to do the underpaintings, which is the important part, of course. So I already have some paint laid out on my palette. This is my gouache palette that I use for everything and have used for basically every professional piece that I make for probably about at least 7 years now. Maybe not 7, 6? Maybe like 6 years. Anyway, this palette doesn't have a brand. I'm sorry, I can't share it with you, but it has rectangular wells and then it has circular wells, and I find this really helpful for gouache. So what I'm going to do for the underpainting is I'm going to make a fairly thin wash of gouache. You can do underpaintings in watercolor as well, and I use that technique quite a lot because the watercolor is a slightly more absorptive pigment than gouache. Gouache reactivates with water quite easily. So I find that watercolor is a little more permanent when you put it down as the base layer. But since this is a gouache tutorial, I'm going to use gouache and show you how that works. So you want to take quite a thin wash of your color. And the reason you want it to be thin is that you don't want it to reactivate when you're adding the layers on top. So it may turn out more of a pink and less of a red, but that is totally fine. You want it to have enough water in it that it's not going to reactivate and affect the colors above it too much. Not by blending together, I mean, but it will affect the colors by virtue of, you know, being the base layer. For this second one, I'm going to use a primary yellow and just do the exact same thing. Wash it out fairly thin. Just like that. And for the blue, I am using a primary cyan. So this is a sort of more designer gouache. It's essentially a phthalo blue. And I'm just going to go over it like that. And then the important part, the very important part, is to let your underpainting dry completely. So usually the underpainting I do the night before I want to start really painting, if that makes sense. So I'll set up my board, I'll set up my paper, I'll do my sketch, and then I'll do the underpainting, and then I'll set it aside overnight so that it can just completely dry and I can come to it with a fresh start in the morning. So I will let this dry, and then I will paint over it, as you can see here, with the colors of the cat toy and the background color that I want to use. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on each of these. So the only difference is going to be the color of the underpainting. Everything else is going to be exactly the same. And once that's done, we're going to come back and talk about what the different colors of underpainting did for the piece. So here are those paintings all finished up, and you can see that they're quite different, even though I used the exact same colors for the toy and the exact same color, which is neutral gray number 2 from Winsor & Newton, for the background. Now, one thing I'd like to point out is that the blue underpainting drastically changed the colors of the mouse, which is because the blue is a complementary color to the warm browns that I used. And the complements of a color, when you mix them together or layer them on top of each other, are going to desaturate and eventually lead to a very neutral color or a very dark color. So you use the complement of a color to darken it in a way that preserves the sort of luminosity or integrity of the color. So The complement of red, for example, is green. So to make a darker red, you would add a little bit of green. So that's what's happening with this mouse, and the reason that it looks so dark in comparison to the mouse on the other underpaintings. And my cat has just arrived, Mina. But yeah, you can see that the red sort of enhances the browns and shines through it, as does the yellow, and they do it in different ways. So this basically shows you why selecting a color for your underpainting is important and how it'll affect the painting that you're going to do. And as a wildlife artist and someone who often works in warm, neutral, or earth tones like these, I don't often use a blue underpainting. I find it to be a little trickier to work with, but if you like to paint things that are blue or purple or even green, then blue underpaintings can be useful. I generally stay towards the red or yellow side of underpaintings, and the next demo that I'm going to do, I'm going to use a sort of orangey yellow underpainting. I'm going to use a raw sienna underpainting. Typically, my favorite colors for doing underpaintings are the warm tones, and specifically my most favorite color for underpaintings is either yellow ochre or quinacridone gold. And I find that these give me a really luminous backdrop to use and really make my paintings look good to me. So one thing to note as well is if I wasn't using an underpainting here, the little pink areas, the little white areas, the little blue areas, those would all be the white of the page. And that might make the painting look unfinished. Hi, Mina. Now, moving on to this next demo, what I'm going to do is do one analogous painting and one complementary painting. So what that means is they're both going to have warm underpaintings, and this one is going to have a warm overpainting as well. But this one, I'm going to do the overpainting in a cool to neutral tone. So he's going to be a blue mouse, this is going to be a brown mouse, but they're both going to have the exact same underpainting. And then we'll see how that looks as well. Now, while you watch me paint these, I wanted to tell you that you can make an underpainting any color you want. Literally any color you want. Some people swear by a neutral gray underpainting. Some people like their underpainting to be quite pale so that a lot of the page is still showing through that color, but it's just not the white of the page. Secondary colors like purple, orange, and green make really cool underpaintings, and I find that the brighter and weirder you go with your underpainting, the more fun it is when you finish the painting and see those little bits of color peeking through. A bright orange or a bright hot pink underpainting, I think, are some of the most fun for me personally, and I would recommend them to anyone who hasn't tried a magenta underpainting or a vermilion underpainting. Turquoise is also a cool option, but as mentioned before, I find blue underpaintings a little trickier to work with because oftentimes in nature, in real life, you're dealing with natural light. And natural light is usually either warm or neutral. And you don't often get cool natural light unless you're painting a night scene. So a blue underpainting, very good for a night scene. I don't paint a lot of those, hence I stray more towards the warm underpaintings. So it's just up to what you're doing, how realistic you're going, how cartoonish you're going, how you're feeling, what you want to try. And I encourage you to explore and find what fits into your painting practice. And there are those two other demos complete, and you can see the difference between them. This one has a nice warm glow and an overall warm look to it. And then this one has sort of a warm glow peeking through a cool painting. So it's sort of like light hitting something on a winter's day or something like that. Obviously it's just a cat toy and just a miniature still life, but it gives you an idea of the different ways that you can use underpaintings in your work and the different ways that I use them in my process as well. Let me know if this was useful to you, if you followed along with this demo and used your own drawing or used the drawing that I provided. You can tag me on Instagram or Twitter at ThoughtsUpNorth. The link is in the description below as well. If you want to support me on Patreon, you can do that as well. You can give me a tip on coffee. And just by subscribing to my channel or watching and liking this video, you're helping me out. Let me know if you enjoyed this tutorial, if you found it helpful. If you have any questions about underpainting, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!